So, hi everyone, my name is Laura Peláez. This is my final presentation for the class Business Intelligence at Universidad del Rosario. And I'm a marketing and digital business student, and I'm almost finished with my degree. So, the topic I chose for this research is coffee, since my family owns a specialty coffee brand and we commercialize coffee that is cultivated in Antioquia, Colombia, and we sell it for both national and international clients. Therefore, for us, it is essential to understand the main characteristics in our competitors' coffee worldwide. That is why I chose to use this database that is the Coffee Quality Institute database, specifically on the variety Arabica, which is the species that is grown here in Colombia. And that is why I chose this database. As we can see, the database has many fields, but I had to clean it first because it had some empty spaces and also it had some columns that we didn't need it for the visualization since they were empty or they were just numbers that just the institute understood. So this database has 39 columns and it has 1,311 rows. So this is the database I'm going to analyze and take it to Tableau for visualization. But first, the main information that is important for this research for me, it's the country of origin. The species, of course, is all Arabica. The altitude, the region, also the kind of the producer, the harvest year, and these characteristics that are essentials for any specialty coffee for it to have like a specific punctuation that is aroma, flavor, aftertaste, acidity, body balance, and sweetness. That gives us the total cup point with each, which is the one characteristic that is telling you if this coffee is a specialty one or not. Then the color, it's also important, and those are like the main information that we're going to analyze. So now we are here in Tableau. We're going to bring that database that I showed you previously, that it's on Excel. So we're going to bring it. It is this one. No, this one. So we have these two sheets that we had on Excel, but we are going to bring this one because the other one is like the explanation. And in here, Tableau is going to organize the fields by whether it's a text, a geographic location, or a number. And in here, we can see that all the information is properly organized. So now we're going to start with the visualization. The first sheet we're going to create, it's a map one. I think it's a proper one to start with the story later on. So we're going to bring the country of origin, drag it in the white canvas. And in here we have all the countries where the specialty coffee comes from that it's on the database. We can see that Colombia is actually in here. So for better visualization of this data, we're going to drag the number of companies that it's in each country. So the company, we're going to drag it in here and we're going to say that this is a measure of count. And we're going to organize it by color. So the darker the color is, the more companies the country has that they have, like that they are producing coffee. And I'm going to choose another color, like for example, orange, that it looks like coffee. In order for the number of the or the name of the countries to appear, we're going to change this to label, and we could also add the number of bags that each of coffee that each country produces. So, for example, we have here the number of bags, and I'm going to say that it shows as a label, and it is like this. So this would be the first sheet that we have. Also, we could just drag this number of bags as a filter, and we're going to say that it is the sum of all the number of bags. And we're going to click on show filter. So now we can just drag this to the information we are looking for, like the countries that produce the most number of bags are Colombia, Brazil, and Guatemala, for example. So this is key for us to have this filter on. Finally, we have to name this sheet as it's a graphic or a map of color of countries by number of companies and number or by number of bags. So this would be our first sheet. So now we're going to make the second sheet that is going to relate the countries and the number of certification bodies that it has each country. The certification body, it's a certification that given by the Coffee Quality Institute. And if your coffee has this certification, it means that it is a good, very good quality coffee. So we have to look for the country of origin and drag it to rows. Then their certification body is going to go to columns, but it has to be a measure of count. And then we're going to organize it from highest to lower. So in here we can see that Mexico has the most count of certification bodies in their coffees, then Colombia, then Guatemala, and then Brazil. Those are the top 4 countries. But also it could be useful for us to understand. So they have a certification body, but what exactly is the number of that body that each country has? So we're going to drag body to marks, and I'm going to use it to add color for it. And in here we can see that, of course, the higher the number of your body in the coffee you own, it's going to give you most likely a certification body, and that is why this country, Mexico, has like a lot of coffee with high body count, and therefore the institution gives them a certification. So, and I'm going to finally add some labels so we can see the count of certifications that each country owns. Finally, just for style purposes, I'm going to change this color to, for example, purple. And I'm also going to change the format that's it. And finally, we just have to name this sheet that would be a graph of number or count of certification body, by country of origin, by body. So now I'm going to create the third sheet, and I want to understand what is the relationship between the country of origin, the variety that each country can produce, depending on the land they have, and also the processing method that they use in each country to process the coffee. So for that, we're going to drag country of origin on rows, also the variety, and we're going to exclude the nulls. And then I'm going to search for the total cup points, which is as the certification body, it gives the higher the points the cup has, the better quality the coffee is. So I'm going to organize it. And in here, we can add color for us to understand better the information, and add the label for us to be able to see the number. And I'm going to organize it from highest to lower, and also add the totals to understand the total in each country. So like this, we can see that of course each country can produce a specific type of variety, and all of it is because of climate condition and also land condition. So for example, Brazil, it's a really rich country because they can produce a wild variety of coffees, not like Burundi, which is another country where they can only produce bourbon because of their land. Like in here, we can see that Colombia, we produce mostly caturra. But for example, I only want to see the top 4 countries that we saw in this other graph. So I'm going to select Brazil, Colombia, Guatemala, and Mexico, that is in here. And we're going to click in here, keep all. So we only can visualize these for the top 4 countries. Finally, another important data that we can drag to this sheet would be the processing method, to understand how the coffee is cultivated from the farms and what is the process they carry on. So I can find it here, processing method. I'm going to just drag it as a filter, exclude the nulls, and show filter. So in here, we can see the different types of processing method that we have, and we can see what countries actually use a better processing method, which is the natural one, and which ones are harming more the environment because they use wash processing method that uses tons of water. So for example, those that uses just washed, everyone is washed or semi-washed, just Brazil, Mexico. Pulped natural, this is interesting because just Brazil can or is using this processing method, and natural, all the countries. So in here we can just play with this filter and get more information. And finally, we're just going to name this sheet that would be a table of cup total cup points by country of origin, by variety, and by processing method. So now for this next sheet, I want to be able to understand or see if there's a relationship between the color of the coffee and the level of acidity that it has. Some people like higher acidity on their coffee, and some people like less acidity level on their coffee. So it would be great if I see if there's a relationship between those two variables. So first, I'm going to drag acidity in here as marks, and I want to tell it that it's going to be size. And then I'm going to drag color and show it as colors, and then color again, but I want to see the label. And in here, I can either show it like squares, but I like better to be like circles. And the last thing I'm going to do is exclude the null ones. And in here, now we have the main colors that exist on coffee, which is green, bluish green, and blue green, or if it has non-color or non-specific color. And since they have different colors, I want to change the colors. So since I want to change the colors because green is appearing as blue, so it's confusing, I'm going to click on edit colors. And now the blue green, I want to be blue. The bluish green, like this one, green, of course, green, and none like, for example, this one. So now it makes more sense. But now I want to show the information in a different way to understand that the level of acidity gives the size of the circle. So for that, we're going to choose analysis, then percentage of the table, and look for acidity again, drag it in here, but as a label. So now we have like the total acidity level in each color. And we can see, of course, that the greatest the acidity level is, the bigger the circle is. So for example, in the green coffee ones, we have an acidity of 77.53%, and the bluish green, the 10.39%, the blue green 7.51%, and none 4.57%. So now finally we can name the sheet as a graph of color by acidity level. And yeah, that would be it. Now for the next sheet, I want to relate the country of origin with the number of bags they produce. But I want it to be shown like this. And again, I'm going to organize it and see that the top 4 countries that produce the most number of bags are Colombia, Guatemala, Brazil, Mexico, and Honduras. So those are the top 4. And again, I'm going to just include the top 4 for us to have a greater look at it and not have a lot of information. So just keep only. So now I want to see the number of producers that each country has, but filter it by a specific number of bags. So I'm going to drag producers in here and add color. So each producer is a color. But since we have, of course, a lot of producers, I'm only interested, for example, on those that have the capacity, there's a specific range of capacity for producing a number of bags. So for that, I'm going to search for number of bags, add it as a filter, and it's going to be the sum. Add it, and then click on show filter. So in here, I just want the information, like for example, those producers that are able to produce from 2,000 bags of coffee. So like that, from 2,000, like this. So from 2,000 up to, for example, I don't know, 50,000. So in here, we are classifying specifically on a category of those producers that can produce that amount of number of bags. So now we're just going to add the label, but I want the label to be something interesting, which could be like the total cup of points that they have. So in here, we can see like the producer, for example, this producer, I'm going to exclude the null ones. So now we have that this producer in Brazil that is called Ipnema Agrácola has this number of cup points. So in here we can know that the greater number of bags they produce, the greater the total cup points they have. Like for example, and also we can see the top producer and the one that is producing less in Brazil. So the top producer is Ipnema Agrácola, and the one that is producing less bags of coffee is Nazareth Diaz Pereira. And like that in each country, in Brazil, Guatemala, Colombia, and Honduras. For example, in Colombia, it happens something really interesting. In this specific range of number of bags, the only producer is La Plata. So they have the greater market share in the market. And the last thing I'm going to do is name this sheet as a graph of number of bags produced by country of origin, by producer, by total cup points. So now I want to make another sheet, but look at a timeline for harvest years. So the harvest years are going to be in columns and the number of bags that were produced on those years. In here. So just like this, we can say that the top year of where all the countries and all the producers and everyone was producing more coffee was the 2012 year, and the last one was 2011. Now I want to see also something interesting would be like to connect those years with the total cup points that they had. So I'm going to add total cup points in here, but I don't want it to be like two graphs. So I want it to be like in the same graph, like this. So we can see something really interesting, that is that the behavior of the total cup points, it's similar to or it's the same, or it follows the tendency of the number of bags produced in each year. Meaning that, for example, when the number of bags increase, the number of total cup points increase. When it decrease, it decrease, and on, and so on. And now, and finally, I want to calculate a field, which is going to be create a calculated field, which is going to be the total weight. Because on this database, I only have two fields or two main data, like the weight for each bag and the number of bags. But I don't have the total weight of the coffee that is produced every year. So for that, I'm going to search for the number bags, the bags weight, and the number of bags in order for me to have the total weight on each year. So in here, I'm going to add the total weight as a filter, and it's going to be the sum. Add it as a filter in here. So now we can see the behavior of the weight produced in total in each year, depending also on the number of bags produced and the total cup points produced. So the name of this graph would be harvest year by or number of bags and total cup points by harvest year by total weight. But for example, I'm going to make an experiment and see what happens if I change the number of bags with acidity, which is like the main characteristic of a coffee that gives the specific total cup points, or is the one that has the greater value for its calculation of the total cup points, which is the acidity. So I'm going to change acidity for number of bags. But I want it to be like in the same one in here. So like this, we can see that the total cup points, it's exactly the same as the acidity of the coffee. So this is something really interesting. We're going to see what happens, for example, with flavor. The same happens. Then with aroma, for example, the same. And then with sweetness, that is also a parameter that they take into account in here. So we can see that there's a direct relationship between the total cup point that each coffee is going to have and the different characteristics of the coffee. So like the sweetness, the acidity, the balance, the body, the flavor, among others. So those parameters are the ones that the Coffee Quality Institute uses to give the coffee a specific cup point qualification. But I'm going to leave it as we had it earlier with the number of bags produced. Like this. So with this graph, we can visualize the changes of these two parameters or series a long time. Now, related to the last graph, we're going to see the level of correlation between the cup point and the different parameters inside a coffee, which would be the aroma, the flavor, the acidity, among others. So for this, we're going to choose the total cup points and drag it to rows. And then, for example, acidity, body, sweetness, aroma. Those are the main four parameters that we as producers know that are important for our cup point classification. So we're going to see if this Coffee Quality Institute uses also these parameters. And we're going to finally add company as the mark. And in here we can see by the number of companies. For this, we can see that there's a point that is really far away from the others, which is like the null company. So we're going to exclude it. And also we have that Guatemala Unix S.A. company is the one that has the highest total company points all over the world. But for us to see more clearly this group of points, we're going to also exclude this one. So now we can see the most of the points. We could leave it or not, but I chose to exclude it. So now we're going to add the trend line. And with this trend line, we can see the correlation between these two parameters, the cup points and the acidity, the body, the sweetness, and the aroma. Finally, what we're going to do is we're going to add one color for each like a parameter. And for that, we have to take this and change the color. For example, acidity is going to be orange, body, I want it to be green, sweetness like purple, and then aroma, we can leave it in blue for us to visualize the data better. This would be our 7th sheet, and I'm going to name it as graph of total cup points by acidity, body, sweetness, and aroma, and the different companies in each one. So in here, we can clearly see the correlations. According to the theory, the closer this R squared number is to 1, it is saying that the higher the correlation is. So for example, in acidity, we have 0.99, in here 0.99, in here 0.996, and 0.998. So I want to order it by the higher correlation ship. So from left to right, the higher correlation ship and the lowest correlation. So in here we have 801. It would just be, oh, I already have ordered it without knowing. So the parameter that has the higher correlation to the cup points is acidity, then body, then sweetness, and then the aroma. For example, if we add other one like flavor, it has less, or it actually has more correlation than acidity. So it would go in here, and also change the color. But for example, something completely different, like this. For example, total weight, it has nothing to do with the cup points. Therefore, the level of correlation is really far away. The R squared is far away from 1. So it shows no correlation. That would be the difference. I'm going to take out flavor to just leave these 4 main parameters. Now the 8th sheet we're going to do, it's seeing the relationship between the altitude and the variety of coffee that each farm is able to make or grow depending on that altitude. Because of course, in the coffee industry, they say that the higher the altitude where the farm is, therefore they're going to be able to make a wild variety of coffee, or grow a wild variety of coffee and specialty coffee. So for that, we're going to drag a variety to the rows. Also, we could add the altitude that it's in here. I'm going to exclude the nulls, and I'm going to organize it from higher to lower. And in here, we can see that the Bourbon, which is a high specialty coffee, it is sold with high prices all around the world. It is grown in the higher altitude. And the same happens with Caturra, which is the most common variety that we produce here in Colombia, as we saw in one of the others graphs. For example, in this one, we can see that Colombia produces more Caturra that has high altitude. And for example, I want to see like the processing method for each variety. And I want to see it in colors, not like that, with this one, like this, and adding the label, organizing by higher and to lower. So another thing we can do in here is dragging as filter the countries. So for example, if we want to filter it by countries, and I'm going to change the filter way of, like, just for example, single value drop down, because there are so many countries. And in here, all right. So this would be our 8th sheet. We could also add so many other filters, like for example, color or company, but we're going to choose just these ones. So for analysis purposes, we can know now that the bourbon variety needs a higher altitude than, for example, the Java variety or the Peaberry variety. And we can also select by country where these types of varieties are grown by altitude and by processing method. So now we're going to change the name of this graph, like altitude by variety by processing method by country of origin. Oh, that will be a fit. Yes. So this would be our if graph. I'm going to change the color for example, this one. No. For example, red gold, this one. So I'm going to add some format to this table for it to be for it to have more colors. So the processing method, I want it to be, for example, in green, and then the variety in blue, and I'm going to do some changes. We would leave it this way. So now for this nice sheet, I want to focus more on Colombia's context, and I'm going to see the number of companies that there are in each region, and also like the total cup points that each region has, and see if there's a relationship between the number of companies that there are and the cup points that each region has. So I'm going to drag first, for example, the company, and I want it to be a measure of count, and this is going to be made in sizes, and then the country of origin in here, but I want to show the filter, and I want just for them to show me the Colombia's context and the by region. So this is Colombia divided by region. And here we have Huila, Santander, Cundinamarca, and so on. In here we don't have any region, so I'm going to exclude this one. So yeah, and just by looking at this, we can see that Huila has the most companies in the country, followed by Santander and Cundinamarca. And then I want to see the cup points that each region has. So I'm going to add this one as a mark and color it. So it means that the darker the blue, the darker blue the region is, it says that it has like more cup points in that region. And it also relates to, for example, the count of companies. Meaning, for example, that in Huila, they have the most companies and the most total cup points. And now I'm going to change this filter. So it's just like this. So we can just type, for example, now I want to see Brazil. And we can see what happens in Brazil. In Brazil, the region that it has most companies and total cut points is south of Minas, followed by Cerrado, Monte Carmelo, and Grama Valley. But since we're in Colombia and the brand we're working on with is from Colombia, we're just going to select Colombia. Like this. And I want the total cut points to be shown as the label. And I'm going to change these colors. For example, this one. No. Maybe this one. So in here, we can see clearly that Huila is the main competitor in this segment of that it has the most count of companies and the most cup points in total. So this is going to be our sheet number 9, and I'm going to name it as a graph of regions or number of companies by country of origin, by region, by total cup points. Yes, this would be the number 9. Finally, for our 10th sheet, we're going to compare the category of defects 1 and 2, because we have 2 categories. The difference, according to the Coffee Quality Institute, is the category 1. It's related to the shape of the coffee, and the category 2, it relates to the taste of the coffee. So the higher the defects a coffee has, the lower the quality is going to be. But I'm going to choose just the Colombia companies. So in filter, we're going to choose just Colombia. Then we're going to drag the companies to the columns. And I want to see the category 1 and category 2 of those defects, but it's not a sum, it's just the measure in counts. Like this. But I don't want to see 2 different graphs, I just want to see one. So we click in here and it helps us to visualize better the data, and we can organize it. In this way, we can see, like, for example, the relationship inside a company. If one company has different types of defects, we're going to exclude the nulls one. And for example, for this first company, that is Sira Cafe and Cias SA, we can see that in category 2 defects, it has 3,000 or 3, and in category 1 defects, it also has 3. But for example, in the Car Cafe company, they have more defects on category 2 than in category 1. So this is the one way of visualizing. For example, if we want just to see those companies that have a difference between category 1 and 2, we can just select those that are, for example, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. If only. And in here is easier to visualize the difference in count of defects for category 1 and 2. So this graph would be called as a graph of categories 1 and 2 defects by company in Colombia. And this is our last graph, or our last sheet for this analysis. Now, the last two things we're going to do is make a dashboard and a story for us to tell you for the viewers. So, for example, I want the dashboard to begin with the global context and then end with what is happening here in Colombia. So for contextualization, we're going to first add this map, make it floating. And these different filters, add it right beside the map. Now, another thing we can add is this one, relating the country of origin and the certification body and the body count in here. But first we have to add some height in our canvas. Like this. So we have to reorganize it first. And here, like this. Make it floating, this filter right here. Change this because it is spelled wrong. All right, now what else? We could add this one. In here, but fit wise. And the same, add these filters down here. I'm just changing like the order of the filter so it doesn't get confused of which filter comes from which graph. Now we're going to add this one in here. And again, fit width. And make it smaller because it's not that big of a graph. Great. Now, what else? The number of bags produced by country of origin. In here. Make floating all the filters. Oops. This. Then we have the timeline. It is really important. So down here. Then for the ones that are related, the different altitudes or the parameters that has to do with the cup points, I'm going to be doing a second dashboard because this one is it already has a lot of graphs. So in this first dashboard, we're just exploring the the global context for each coffee company. And in the second dashboard that we're going to make, it's relating the acidity among others. Although, for example, this one that it's relating acidity, we could just leave it for the other dashboard. So we have less graphs in each dashboard for the viewer to be less confused by it. like this. So in this dashboard, again, we just have like the global context. In the second dashboard, we're going to see the different parameters. So we have the acidity, it weighs, then this one, this one should be down here, like this. Yes. Also this one that is relating the altitude. And these two last ones are related to Colombia. So we add them in a new dashboard as well. And this one. Like this. So now we can name, I think we have all of them, but we have to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now this is going to be the dashboard called Colombia. This one dashboard called values. And this one global. So we don't get confused. And the last step is just create a story. So we're going to create the story to show this presentation, for example, to my family, that they are going to be the ones interested in the information that I found or the analysis that I did. So again, we're going to follow the same structure, like starting from the context and the values, and then what is happening here in Colombia. So we'll start with this global context with a map that is more visual. And we take the title of this graph, add it as a text in here. Oops. We can change the color, for example, of this to match the color of the map. And also, I'm going to add it in here. Next one, next slide in the story is going to be this one. So the same, we look for the title of the graph. We copy it in here. And I want it to be purple. By country. Like this. Then the third slide is going to be this one, relating the total cup points by country of origin, by variety, and processing method. Again, we have to drag this text. I'm going to make it blue. Dragging here, copying it there. And the fourth one, it's the one that relates the color by acidity level. It could be that one, or we could, no, I prefer it to be this one, that it is still relating like global context and countries of origin. So it's going to be this one, that it's called number of bags. Number of bags produced by country of origin, by producer, and by total cups. Change the color. Now it's in there. And we copy this title and add it in there. Now, is there any other one that it's talking about the, yes, this one, the timeline. So the timeline goes in here. And the timeline, this is the title. We drag the ad text, change the color, for example, this one. Copy this text. Now we do start with the values. For example, we have here the types of color and the level of acidity. So this one. Change the color as well and paste it in here. Now we go with the altitude and the different parameters. So the altitude is this one. We drag the text. Change the color. Then this one over here, that it relates the different parameters and total cup points. In black. What is left is those two that relates to Colombia. So this one and this one. The first one, name is in here. We use red, center it. in here. And finally this one, like this. And that would be it. The last thing we could do is in the layout, change the navigator style, like for example in number, dots, or arrows only. I personally prefer to use the caption boxes because we could already know what is the title of the graph we're going to show, better than just having numbers but not knowing what is going to be shown. So I prefer the caption boxes, and this would be like the presentation of our work. So in here we have the dashboard, and here we have the story, and we can change if we want to present it to somebody from different slides and explaining the different data, but also using the filters for us to narrow it for our necessities and our purposes. And so that would be the end of this presentation. I hope it was enjoyable and I could understand better now the context of the global quality coffee in different parts of the world and in here in Colombia. And now this information will be really useful for our brand to compare our values and our parameters to others outside Colombia and inside our country. And thank you very much.